Will Western Europe end before 2030? There are some clear indications that the end of Western European civilization is not only close, but inevitable. Today I'm going to walk you through some of the more recent observations that I've personally witnessed across the European Union concerning trends that seem to be irreversible and destructive to the overall health of Europe, or more specifically, the European Union. Let's first address regularization programs across Europe, not just the European Union, but the United Kingdom as well. There is a trend happening, and that is governments are accepting and naturalizing people that entered the country without legal means. They entered into European countries by breaking the law pretty much. And one of the more recent, very, very shocking announcements that we have seen out of Western Europe, of course, includes Spain, that publicly stated that they would regularize over 500,000 illegals that are currently in the country. Now, 500,000 illegals will be undergoing the regularization program in Spain, which is shocking to Spaniards living in Spain, law-abiding citizens that never thought that their country would even think about doing something of this very nature. Spain used to be a country of rule of law, even though perhaps not as strong as their Central European and Northern European counterparts, but the law was always respected in Spain to a decent degree. But what we are seeing now, where the very head of the Spanish country leadership decided to make this announcement and pretty much regularize over 500,000 people, which will put a strain on the Spanish healthcare system. It will put a strain on Spanish taxpayers. I mean, to sustain 500,000 people that, by the way, might not add a lot of value to the country, because we're not talking about doctors and engineers here. We're not talking about a skilled immigrant program that specifically attracted people from highly skilled countries that are backed up by education that's badly needed in Spain to sustain society there. We're really talking about people that flooded into the country by breaking the law and that haven't really shown a whole lot of effort, neither willingness to integrate, contribute, and make Spain a better place. The argument that politicians make across the European Union is, of course, that because of the low birth rates, because of labor shortages, we have no other option but to open up our doors to immigrants from all backgrounds, all nations, all religions, because we need them. If it were really true, why hasn't Spain demonstrated more diligent effort toward attracting immigrants from highly skilled countries with the required educational backgrounds to immigrate to Spain? Spain could pretty much cherry pick and choose citizens of countries where the rule of law is more respected and where people have a more desirable educational background, diplomas, because at the end of the day, if it were really true, that's what Spain really needs. However, we're not seeing such a diligent effort toward attracting people from highly skilled nations, and there are many that I could name. It just seems to me like Spain is picking nationals from countries that can't really contribute too much to the Spanish economy, that are going to be more of a burden than a help. On top of that, the majority of people that immigrated to Spain illegally are men, not women. There's clear evidence that the vast majority of people that did not respect the rule of law of Spain actually are male. And that's how these nations work. They send their strongest people first, of course, males, and perhaps later on they're going to send their wives and their children and the elderly so that they can also live with them in the new countries. Now, Spain isn't the only country that has this inherent problem. If we look at Spain's north, France, we do see a very similar picture of a country that used to be a former colonial superpower that is now embracing immigration from countries it used to colonize, which is understandable. Perhaps it's some kind of retribution. However, from an economic perspective, it doesn't make sense to take in people from nations that have very little capacity to contribute to uplifting the economy of France. And heading up further north to to the United Kingdom, where we see a very similar picture of people flooding into the country, and especially people from countries that the UK used to colonize, there is some kind of cleanup of past historic history going on, in my personal opinion. Plus, arguably, some of the EU's politicians and perhaps also UK politicians are bought for by foreign politicians, potentially kings that want to gain a lot of influence in the European continent. We're seeing this, and again, I believe this is a fact, just by how many foreign majors are currently handling the UK affairs. If we take a look at majors of, the biggest UK metropolitans, we clearly see foreign nationals that immigrated to the UK that ended up creating a different environment, that ended up having influence over a country that they're not a native of, and totally changed the whole trajectory of the economic and political outlook of a once superpower like the United Kingdom. One of the biggest challenges that Europeans are dealing with in this very century, and something that doesn't seem to be getting better before 2030, is of course the ever-increasing cost of living across the continent. Once affordable things such as utilities, groceries, dining out, insurance have become luxury items for middle-class Europeans. If you have to worry about keeping the lights turned on because you can't afford electricity prices, because the price per kilowatt is so out of reach, it becomes more understandable why Europeans are actually looking into more realistic alternatives, such as a relocation to an emerging country where the cost of living, more specifically electricity, is affordable. Now, we are based out of Asunción, Paraguay, where the electricity cost is a small fraction of what you might see in an EU country or even the United Kingdom. Many people that became clients of ours that ended up leaving Europe for Latin America, specifically Paraguay, ended up paying a small fraction, like I said, 20 to 30% of their electricity costs back in Europe, making life more affordable, increasing the quality of life, and of course having less to worry about. Not only has dining out become unaffordable and a luxury item for many Europeans, it's also true that the culinary landscape of major European metropolitans is shifting rapidly into cuisines that you might not even be accustomed to, neither want to consume on a daily basis. Like, native food is becoming rarer in a sense that there's just less availability in major European metropolitans because of the shifting demographics of these neighborhoods in these major European metropolitans. You do see also a drastic shift in culinary experiences throughout Europe's biggest cities. Perhaps the most severe consequence of aging populations, low birth rates, and immigration from unskilled geographic locations across the planet is, of course, lack of affordable healthcare, which is something that everybody has to deal with, no matter how old you are, no matter what your background might be, no matter where you live in Europe. The fact is, you are not going to have access to healthcare like you used to. You might experience extraordinary long wait times just to see a doctor. You might find it very difficult to find a specialist to solve your health condition. And consequently, because of the lack of supply of highly trained health professionals, you also now see increased costs, and most importantly, the waiting times are just through the roof, which makes it less desirable to live in Europe than just 10 to 20 years ago. I can't imagine anything scarier than living in a place where healthcare is inaccessible, unaffordable, or non-existent. And unfortunately, the cold hard reality that Europeans are facing that's gonna get worse before 2030 is, of course, the lack of accessible and quality healthcare. And I'm speaking here from personal experience. I've been back in Europe many times throughout the past 5 years, in fact, throughout the past 10 years and 15 years, and I've seen a consistent decrease in the availability of highly skilled, highly trained health professionals in many different fields, and the prices are higher than ever. Insurances might not cover like they used to. And the worst part is that if you really need healthcare, you might not be able to get it. And like I've said, this is getting worse before 2030, because this is all about supply and demand. And the more people demand health services and the fewer available doctors there are, the more difficult it will become to have access to healthcare. And this is a completely new problem that Europeans are dealing with in the 21st century. Healthcare used to be the most prestigious thing that Europeans had access to. Europeans were proud of the quality of the healthcare they once had access to. They were proud of having pretty much an unlimited supply of highly trained doctors, because no other continent could offer it at an affordable price like Europe did. Now, if we take a look at, North American counterparts, where of course quality healthcare is available, but pretty much unaffordable unless you have very good private insurance. And even then, you have to deal with out-of-pocket expenses and pretty high premiums. Now, if all of this doesn't sound concerning to you, and you don't think that continuing life in Europe will bring you problems before 2030, I do have some very bad news for you today. Tax rates are expected to increase throughout the European Union before 2030. And this is true for a number of reasons. First of all, if you don't have enough money to pay for infrastructure, if you don't have enough money from taxes, if you don't have enough people that contribute, what options do you have? Well, you don't really have any healthier alternatives other than raising current income tax rates and potentially even value-added tax rates, which of course would be a nightmare to the European economy, because the higher value-added taxes become, the less and less people will be able to spend on everyday items, making life less affordable and decreasing the quality of life overall. This goes without saying. This is basic economics. And because of this undeniable fact that Europeans are facing throughout the 21st century, I don't see anything here that's positive, that would add to a positive outlook where you could say that, hey, tax rates are actually going to decrease over the next 5 years. Value-added tax rates are going to come down. I think, based on the economics that I studied, they're only going to increase, and unfortunately, consequently, the quality of life will decrease. And I think you will see a lot of entrepreneurs departing the European Union and also the UK, because corporate tax rates are also going to increase. And because of that, more and more entrepreneurs will start looking into destinations with lower corporate tax rates, less red tape, and a more conducive environment to starting, operating, and succeeding with a business, be it local or digital. I know this doesn't sound good, and I know the outlook for 2020 looks actually quite dark, but unfortunately we're living in a new reality where governments might not have an option other than increasing taxes. And we're talking about taxes across the board. We're not just talking about personal income tax rates that are the highest in Europe. Out of all the continents that we're looking at worldwide, Europe is home to the highest personal income tax rates, and it's not even close. If we look at the US, 37% is the top income tax rate. In some European countries, we're looking up to 55% in personal income tax rates, which of course scares off entrepreneurs, which of course makes high net worth entrepreneurs and individuals consider leaving the continent altogether to find a setup in a destination that's more tax friendly. Now, it is true that if you do fall in the unemployed or working class category, personal income tax rates might not affect you so much. However, if you're middle class, upper middle class, or wealthy, this will affect you very much. While low-income earners might only pay a personal income tax rate of 0 to 20%, middle-income earners are looking to pay anywhere from 20 to 35% in personal income taxes. And like I've said, people that fall into the highest income tax brackets are looking to pay anywhere from 35 to 55% or more in personal income taxes. Now, this does not include corporate taxes, this does not include inheritance taxes, and this does not include value-added taxes that we're all paying on a daily basis for the things that we need to survive and thrive. And because of that, it's just crazy to see how the vast majority of your money is being taken away by a government or governments that might contribute very little to the overall well-being of your nation. I don't want to sound like a doomsday forecaster. However, there is a big concern surrounding Europe that might become a reality in just a few short years' time, and that is the digitalization of currency in Europe, which might bring the end of financial liberties as we know it. Now, it is true that to legalize a digital currency, the top of the board in any country does need approval from the lawmakers. Now, lawmakers can be bought for through a lot of different means, and given the current times we're living in, that might be true or might not be true depending on the geography where you're located. However, in Europe's case, we do see a lot of so-called unelected officials that are at the very top of the leaderboard, making decisions that you, I, and other people did not agree to. We did not give consent to these decisions, and consequently, digital Europe might further expand with the introduction and full implementation of a digital euro, which of course could mean the end to personal freedom as we know it. Your transactions will be visible, potentially preventable, regulated to the point where the government could say, hey, we want to control your spending. We don't want you to keep spending so much money on a certain category, or perhaps even outside the country, which of course would lead to the destruction of personal liberties as we have lived them and have known them for a very long time. What are the odds of us preventing something like this from playing out? Especially the last point that I just mentioned, the digitalization of currency, which is probably unpreventable because at the end of the day, if it's not kings, monarchs, imperials, nowadays, top politicians make the calls. It's no longer us. It's the top of the leadership that makes all the important decisions. And you and I have very little say to what's going on in the world today. And because of that, our options are thinning. And because of that, our freedoms are slipping away pretty rapidly. And because of that, it might be better to secure a plan A or B before it's too late, and certainly before 2030. Now, if Europe's policies are concerning, are scary to you, and you do want to start over in a low-cost, low-tax or tax-free country such as Paraguay and Panama, I highly recommend you to book a consultation with Nomad Elite today. There are some really interesting places out there that still value personal freedom and, more importantly, that respect the personal liberties of its citizens and residents. And such countries include Panama, Costa Rica, Paraguay, and Uruguay. In a country like Paraguay, your foreign sourced income is not taxed, so you can live a low-cost lifestyle and consume overseas income tax-free while you are a resident of Paraguay. And the best part is that you also have a path to citizenship here. If you have lived in the country for 3 consecutive years on permanent residency, you may qualify for Paraguayan citizenship. Of course, there are certain requirements that you need to meet. However, it's more possible to become a citizen of Paraguay than it was just a few years ago. Also, a place like Panama might make perfect sense to you if you want to start a business or you have foreign sourced income that you want to consume tax-free in the beautiful Central American country. Panama makes a lot of sense. It's also relatively easy to get residency. You can qualify for Panamanian residency by showing an income proof of just 1,000 United States dollars monthly. Or you can also qualify for Panamanian residency by incorporating a business and employing yourself. These are really immigrant-friendly countries, and I highly recommend you to start looking elsewhere. If you feel like Europe's no longer the right place for you, please go to nomadelite.com and click on book a consultation. I look forward to speaking with you and helping you make this transition as smooth as silk. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your attendance, and I look forward to welcoming you to Latin America.